In 1930, Bertrand Russell wrote, "Religion prevents our children from having a rational education. Religion prevents us from removing the fundamental causes of war. Religion prevents us from teaching the ethic of scientific cooperation in place of fierce doctrines of sin and punishment. It is possible that mankind is on the threshold of a golden age. But if so, it will be necessary first to slay the dragon that guards the door. And this dragon is religion." Our next speaker, Peter, is the editor of the Open Society, the official journal of the NZARH, the longest running association devoted to free thought in New Zealand. In 2012, he initiated a project called the Secular Education Network, dedicated to freeing our public schools from the infiltration of religion. He is passionate about and openly active in promoting and defending a secular education in New Zealand. Please welcome Peter Harrison.
Before I begin to talk to you about the state of secular education in New Zealand, I would like to spend a few minutes to acknowledge a young woman from Pakistan who lived in the Swat Valley. She found the courage to speak out in favour of equality and freedom. She spoke out against religious fanatics who sought to deprive her of an education. I'd like to think that today we were able to stand with Malala Yousafzai in opposing those who seek to undermine equality and freedom. Malala is an inspiration, I believe, to us all. Today I'm going to talk to you about how New Zealand's education system was established as secular, how that secularism was undermined, and how we are campaigning for the return to a truly inclusive and secular state school system. In 1877, Charles Bowen authored and introduced the first Education Act to New Zealand. It established free, compulsory and secular education. It made school compulsory for children between the ages of 7 and 13. Prior to this, there was a mixture of private religious schools. My involvement began with several letters from parents, sort of in my role as editor, who suffered as a consequence of religious instruction. Many of the stories involved confused young children upset about why they were being excluded, bullied, given rubbish duties by teachers, or at best left alone in libraries. Many parents reported not being told about religious instruction, only to have children coming home asking about their God and saying dinosaurs did not really exist. Sometimes religious instruction is renamed to something else that does not relate to religion, such as values in action. In other schools, religion is simply not simply not mentioned. They don't discuss it as... They don't talk about it to the parents, even though that it is explicit in these religious instruction classes. When parents do find out about these classes from their children and decide to opt their children out, they are often told the classes are only values education. This is evidently false, as it is indicated by the material supplied by religious organisations. Parents who opt children out are sometimes excluded from other unrelated school activities. They're excluded from the school environment and in the school culture and community. Sometimes children are asked by teachers why their parents have opted them out. And some parents have been escorted off school property when they've come to pick up their children before the RI. It was evident that a significant number of parents had faced similar issues of discrimination. And that's why we started the Keep Religion Out of Schools Facebook page. It was established to help parents by giving them a place to discuss the issue. And as more parents became involved, it was clear that we needed to reach out more broadly. And so in March 2012, we had our first in-person meeting of the Secular Education Network, as it was to be called. We concluded that the Nelson Clause is inconsistent with the Human Rights Act. It's also inconsistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights. School boards should not show preference for the majority-dominant religion. Doing so is active discrimination against those minority religions and with no religion at all. The purpose of establishing the Secular Education Network was to help parents communicate with the schools. Several members of SEN have reported in the past successes in changing policies in schools by lobbying the school boards. So we had an active model, we had a way of determining the most effective way to shut down religious instruction in schools at the individual local level. To help this, the NZARH funded an advertising campaign into the community and to contact parents. We executed the campaign with coordinated efforts between the media and advertising on the internet. David Hines, a Methodist lay preacher, was invaluable in communicating with our sympathetic preachers. So we ended up having Clay Nelson, a priest associate from St Matthew's in Auckland. He came onto national television to say that we shouldn't have religion in schools. Both I and David were interviewed on radio, ironically feature on Christian radio Rima more than once. There was also a storm of publicity in the papers, and letters to the paper were so numerous on this issue that editors stopped accepting them on that subject. Perhaps one of the most important challenges in a campaign of this nature is the communication in a positive way. We need to frame the message in a way that is saying something positive rather than opposing what is largely perceived as in the population as something the good, i.e. values. One of the first messages developed was, all children deserve to be taught values. All children. Religious instruction classes in New Zealand attempt to frame themselves as values classes and do not properly inform parents about the true nature and character of these classes. Our message was that values education should be conducted in an inclusive way. In fact, the best way to teach values is for all of us to be good examples. Religious instruction classes are not inclusive, and thus are a bad example of tolerance and belief of others. Our message made it clear that values education should not be denied children just because they are not of a dominant religion. We also addressed the confusion over opting out versus opting in. The New Zealand system has an opt-out system in which parents write to the school to exclude their children from religious instruction. The opt-out and opt-in terminology is confusingly similar, and so we've developed a more precise term to clarify this. We now promote the concept of informed consent. By informed consent, we mean that parents must be told the religious instruction is occurring and the nature of that instruction. It must not be confused with values education, which is part of the normal school curriculum. Consent means that explicit consent of parents prior to the children being included must occur. It does not mean including children prior to consent and waiting for the parents to object. Our efforts have resulted in parents taking schools to task. One example was the case in 3 parents who complained about the treatment in St Heliers School. The parents ended up appearing on TV when they took their complaints to the Human Rights Commission. The media attention has resulted in a whirlwind responses from those supporting religious indoctrination. So I'm going to talk now about some of the arguments our opponents use to try and discredit us and argue that we should have religion in schools. So the first one is, isn't it good to teach about religion? Isn't that a good thing? Religious instruction classes specifically teach the doctrine of the religious organisations conducting the programs. For the vast majority, this means a carefully constructed curriculum to teach children about the Christian God and Jesus as Redeemer. There is also, of course, nothing wrong with teaching these things on a Sunday school context, where the children attend with the parents' consent. It teaches only a highly sanitised version of the Bible stories with the sole purpose of reinforcing the religious messages they wish to communicate. Some people call this indoctrination. These classes are not teaching an objective or unpartisan view of religion. They are teaching only about Christianity from the point of view of an evangelical believer. The Secular Education Network supports genuine religious education, where students are taught about all of the major world religions in an objective and impartial manner. We agree that genuine religious education classes do have value. There is an opportunity to do this in social studies and history classes within the curriculum at a more appropriate age. There is no need to close schools and request permission for a balanced and impartial study of religion. However, this kind of impartial study is at the polar opposite to the sectarian religious instruction classes held outside of school hours. The second argument raised against our position is that religious instruction teaches values. One of the most popular arguments for supporting religious instruction is that it gives our children values. Even among atheists, this perception is common. However, there are some major flaws in this idea. The New Zealand curriculum specifies a set of values that schools should endeavour to instil. These values include excellence, innovation, critical thinking, diversity, equity, community, integrity, and respect for others. Our education professionals are taught how to instil these values in our children. So either the school is doing its job and religious instruction classes are not required, or the school is not doing its job well and relying on religious instruction, in which case these children who opt out are not taught any values at all. The problem with leaving instruction and values to religious instruction class is the values are incidental to the core message of religious belief. The core message of religious instruction classes is belief and worship in God and His Son Jesus. Every single lesson plan revolves around the God belief. Only some of the lessons teach values we would recognise from the New Zealand curriculum, and some, like critical thinking, are actively discouraged. Most damaging isn't the explicit curriculum, but rather the religious instruction class teaches about segregation, exclusion, and intolerance. What kind of example are we setting when we segregate children based on their religion? How is the teaching of values of tolerance in respect to others? How is this a building united community? Our schools should be an example of the values we hope to impart in our children. But they say, isn't Christianity part of our tradition and history? Some academics appear to believe that religious instruction classes gives children the opportunity to learn about their heritage and history. Is the existing social studies and history curriculum not up to the job? The New Zealand social studies and history curriculum give children an appreciation of world religions taught in a balanced and impartial way. However, we do not teach complex ideas to children at age 5. Subjects such as social studies and history wait until the children have developed their critical reasoning skills and can understand the complex issues. What is certain is that children will not learn any appreciation for history at age 5 in a religious instruction class. Religious education is not a history class. Children get taught Bible stories, sing songs, listen to prayers, and learn to love Jesus. It would be a grave mistake to believe that religious instruction classes gives children a robust appreciation of New Zealand history. Volunteers who take religious instruction are not equipped or qualified to teach history or social studies. They have been given a simple curriculum designed specifically to promote faith in God. Of course, many people consider such instruction good and wholesome. To those people, I suggest that you take the opportunity to go to the Wanimini church services on Sunday, where you can take your children to participate in Sunday school. But please do not pretend that a historical or traditional position of privilege accorded to Christian belief in New Zealand in schools gives you the right to access all children. There are many practices that are traditional that we have allowed to fade into history. Sectarian instruction in state schools exists to impart doctrine, not to teach history. One of the final arguments is around democracy. Shouldn't we allow the majority to decide what religion to teach? School boards of trustees are elected by the community. There is an argument that we should allow these democratically elected boards to decide which religion should be endorsed and supported. Are we not a democratic society? The primary issue with this argument is exposed when we replace the word religion with political party. If schools were given the power to decide which political party could come in and teach the children about politics, the injustice would be clear to all. Imagine the school giving the political party the right to come in and instruct children in the correct political belief. Imagine that parents were not informed about the instruction. Imagine parents would have to opt out in writing when they discover their classes are occurring. New Zealand would never tolerate this kind of political intrusion into schools, but for some reason they continue to accept sectarian religious intrusion into our state schools. The New Zealand Bill of Rights and Human Rights Act ensures freedoms are not violated. Having the local community vote to exclude your religion while including the majority religion is clearly inequitable, unjust, and a violation of our right to freedom of belief. In summary, our basic human rights should not be swept away by the fickle opinions of the local majority. We need to protect minorities with a law that is equal for all. The state should treat everyone equal under the law. The final argument is rather ironic. They claim that by taking away religious instruction from schools, we are taking away their human rights. So it has been suggested they cry out that they are persecuted and their right to freedom of belief is violated. Why should a few people stop what most other people want? What is really occurring is that the special rights granted Christianity are being withdrawn. Nobody is burning down their churches or banning their personal prayer in schools, preventing them from running religious instruction classes outside of school hours. In fact, given the decline of religious attendance, it would be a positive boon for the churches to encourage their members to attend church and send their children to Sunday school rather than leaving it to religious instruction programs which are not specific to their denomination. Church attendance has been in decline, with many churches closing down through lack of support. Having religious instruction in state schools has arguably reinforced the decline of church attendance by giving parents a way out, by giving their children nominal Christian instruction while not going to church on the Sabbath. It would therefore be a potential benefit for church attendance if religious instruction in state school was terminated, thus encouraging parents to attend church and children to attend Sunday schools. The Secular Education Network supports the idea that all beliefs should be treated equally. The state or one of its proxies should not endorse any particular religion. We insist that no religion be given special access to our vulnerable children in public schools. We do not want our children to be treated like second-class citizens in their own country because they do not believe in the school-approved religion. Schools should not be in the business of approving of religions at all. So where are we from 3 years on from our start, from our genesis? We now have over 8,000 Facebook friends on the Keep Religion Out of Schools page. And we have 1,000 members on the Secular Education Network group. David Hines, a Methodist lay preacher, has taken the leading role in the management and promotion of the Secular Education Network. He has conducted research into the numbers of schools operating religious instruction. He has been at the forefront of campaigns appearing on television and to defend parents who are being attacked, speaking out for their religious freedoms. He has performed a detailed analysis of all of the curriculums that they provide. Secular Education Network now has a project team which meet on a regular basis to review our progress and the projects being run. These can range from media projects promoting our point of view, helping parents to deal with school boards who are not following the legislation, and helping organise local educational leaflet drops which we conduct around schools that are not providing sufficient information. We've also lobbied for law change at the national level, engaging with politicians from every political party in the last election. But the sad fact is that despite there being a broad consensus in our favour in the general population, even among the religious, our politicians do not have the stomach to approach the issue. In fact, we have had a setback with the introduction of charter schools, which has explicitly been able to use public funds for indoctrination of children, despite appearing before the Select Committee to make a strong case against charter schools on the basis of objective results in other countries. It is disturbing that the government would conduct experiments on our children. Our focus is now broadening to explore legal avenues. There has been a multitude of complaints to the Human Rights Commission. We have made complaints about the Ministry of Education to the Human Rights Commission, and we are bringing the cases of several parents to the Commission to show that the problem of religious instruction in public schools is systemic. This hearing will be held next week with the Human Rights Commission. We hope that the Ministry will consider publishing guidelines to schools about how to avoid discrimination. Allow me to sum up by saying that this fight will not cease until we achieve our aims. We will tackle the issues on all fronts, in the media, in the schools, in the courts, and in the government. But ultimately the law must change. The end game is a change that will see a genuine secular education reinstituted in New Zealand. Thank you.